Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Jacob Licklight here, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 17th of July, 2018, we are starting the final Jon Pertwee story, which is as a story, it's a celebration of his era, going through quite a lot of the tropes, and of course we're starting with Planet of the Spiders, starting with part one, written by Robert Sloman and Barry Letts, with, of course, um, um, with, of course, the with the story being starting with um, with the whole context of this is sort of a sequel to Invasion of the Dinosaurs, um, mainly in the fact that we open with Mike Yates being back and Sarah Jane being called away to a Buddhist monastery for a story, because Mike Yates has a suspicion that there's some shady things going on, not by the leaders of the Buddhist colony, but by some of the people, Buddhist monastery, but the people there are a bit weird. And by that, he means that, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, that's a thing, that's a bit weird. And it turns out they end up summoning a titular spider at the end of the episode, which is our cliffhanger, like a giant spider. Like seriously, what is it? It's weird. It's like, oh, we have a random a real random story, like random spider. This guy called Lupton, who is deliciously evil. I guess that would describe him. Yeah, pretty deliciously evil. He's one of the people who's like, he's literally working with the spiders, he's going to be working with the spiders, which is quite funny when you think about it in context, because these spiders, you have that these spiders are here. No real reason. They're just there at the end, and it's our cliffhanger. It's a good cliffhanger. Like seriously, it's a good reveal, and it'll be interesting to see where exactly the story goes with it. But also, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the spiders if they continue to be good, really good, solid characters, or if they stop. Um, they stop halfway through. Um, with everything being what it is, you you really get um, the feeling that the story ends very well. It's one of those It's a story that you get the solid ending. You get the big the episode's big finale. While we're still focusing on Sarah Jane and her, I guess her plight. Um, you know, something that is really good. It's a really good um, um, it's a really really good story. It gives us a sense of just the wonder and um, what the story is meant for, um, and you really get a sense that every wrong is sort of righted by the end of it, and not just that it's a bad story, um, but that it's one that the story is solid enough to um, you know, give us an ending. It's really interesting where you have Sarah Jane off on her own thing, and I haven't even talked about the Doctor yet because the Doctor has some stuff. The Doctor and Brigadier actually have their plot where they see this Doctor or Clegg guy who is he says he's a psychic, and for once he actually is like the Doctor runs a bunch of tests. He is the guy is able to Professor Clegg is able to tell that that the sonic screwdriver is not of this world, and it shows footage from Carnival of Monsters, as well as giving the story, you know, giving the story something good to go with, as well as just having a decent sort of middle episode. It does a lot of stuff really well. It's one of those and then you have the Doctor, and then you have Joe Grant actually sends the Doctor a crystal from Metebelis 3, and that's interesting. It's like, and they figure Clegg figures out that it's from Metebelis 3. It's not it's not a good sort of thing. It's not one of those, hey, we've just got this this whole Metebelis 3 thing. Like, that gets brought back into it, and the Doctor is of course also brought back into it, and that's sort of where their thing ends. There's some decent action of everything's dying, but other than that, that's where it ends. So outside of just the fact that it doesn't really pull the plot together, I'm going to give at part 1 of Planet of the Spiders a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 17th of July 2018, and I just finished watching part 2 of Planet of the Spiders, which is, I hate to be the one to say this, it's a chase scene. That is what most of the episode is. We have the spider jump on Lupton's back. Sarah Jane gets back to unit, and it turns out, they want the crystal. It's never quite explained why they want the Metebelis crystal, at least in this episode, but they want it. It was stolen from the planet. They say they should have it. They're ruling the planet, so they're going to go and try and get it from the Doctor, using Lupton, which of course just leads to all sorts of hijinks. You have a chase on the Whomobile, a chase on the helicopter, chase on water skis, and at the very end, Lupton just teleports away. Like, that's our cliffhanger. Lupton teleports away, and it's an amazing cliffhanger. Like, seriously, how it gives you that. Wait, why did we took this turn? Oh, that's an interesting turn, and it's not badly done, badly executed by any means. But it is just, there isn't anything I can talk about in this episode. It's a chase, and let's be honest, the chase goes on a little too long. I get that they're trying to do a whole, they're doing this whole, it's it's an homage to the entire era of Jon Pertwee, because after the first Tom Baker story, Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks were gone. They were no longer working on the show, which makes sense. They left, but very sadly, the very very sadly, the episode doesn't really deliver. It's one where everyone is like, it's like, okay, we're doing this, it's we're going on, and it's not a total and complete, it's not a total and complete story. It's just like, okay, we're going on, and you know what? It's a fine episode. I can see where people have fun with it. It doesn't do much for me. I would rather see it in us get some more plot in, but it is enjoyable enough, and I do see there's definitely a value to it. But again, there's no real plot. It's a chase. We are back where we started. It's padding for an entire episode. So, that being said, because again, there isn't much really to talk about in this story. It's just sort of there. I'm going to give Planet of the Spiders Part 2 a 6 out of 10. Alright, it's the 18th of July 2018, and I just finished watching Part 3 of Planet of the Spiders. And Part 3 of Planet of the Spiders is again an excellent episode, and an excellent example of when Doctor Who does something very, very nice. Well, I'd argue that Planet of the Spiders is one of the early stories, along with the Time Monster, to really tackle the 4-part structure, where you sort of have a big plot in a 4-part, but then something switches, so you have 2 extra parts. Sometimes the 2 parts go first, sometimes the 4 parts go first. This time the 2 parts go first, and Part 3 almost immediately transitions us into the big 4-part story, I guess you could call it, the actual Spiders story, the story on Metebelis 3, where, well, Lupton because we've been with Lupton immediately disappearing, and that's scary, because it's like, well, how did he disappear? And that is, it's built in just to think like, wait, how did this happen? Like, he can't just be gone. You don't just, people don't just disappear like that. No, they have to, if someone's going to disappear, they've got to, actually, do it. And he reappears, well, right back. He reappears, well, right back in the Buddhist, the Buddhist, sort of monastery place. So obviously, it's one of those things where it's like, this is one of those stories where they question Choji about it, and Choji sort of essentially is like, basically this episode sort of establishes that he is not the villain of this piece. He's not on the side of the spiders. He's sort of a third party, at least that's what we think so far, which is honestly really good for the character, because it's like, okay, we know he's a character, and we know that he's a character who has basically built himself up as, sort of being outside of everything. Something that it's something that the character creates interestingly. It's an interesting sort of facet to the character. He doesn't have he doesn't have to be the complete we don't have to know everything about him. We get these little hints that he's something more than what we see. Little hints that something's not quite right with him. Not quite all there. You get that question, and that's really well done. But honestly, this story is more important because it takes us to Metebelis 3, where we see the spiders have a court. They've installed a totalitarian regime, and this totalitarian regime is basically hits it's a regime where well, you have the entire regime built on the fact that you have the entire regime built on the whole idea that they're not spiders, they're the 8 legs. And you have the humanoids on Metebelis 3 locked up. And our big thing is that Sarah Jane is transported there through the bottom, through the mandala in the basement of the Buddhist monastery, and the doctor has to follow her. And there's a big fight with the guards of the spiders, and the doctor's left for dead, and that's our cliffhanger. And it's an amazing cliffhanger. Don't get me wrong, this is just... this story likes to grab things, one thing after another, and it does a really, really solid job at that. That being said, there's also some interesting stuff. You have the character of Tommy, who is this... He's at the Buddhist monastery, but he's kind of this, he's not exactly a fully fleshed out character. He's sort of like mentally challenged, and he's like just sort of he means well. They don't do as much with him. They just have him steal the crystal, and they just said, well, we're just gonna bluff the 8 legs with this because the crystal's gone. So what do? We just bluff him, and that's pretty good. So overall, I'm gonna give Planet of the Spiders Part 3 an 8 out of 10. Alright, it is the 19th of July 2018, and I just finished watching Part 4 of Planet of the Spiders. And Part 4 of Planet of the Spiders is a very interesting part, mainly because as an episode, it's sort of like, it does some really interesting things. It decides, it brings up the idea that the humans on Metebelis 3 came from a crashed spaceship, and that they are humans. So here's my question. It's one of those stories where you have them. You have the you have the characters sort of establish that they are from Earth. So are the spiders. Like, the idea is that the spiders actually evolved from Earth spiders? So does that mean we're actually in the future? So does the mantle actually time travel you? Or is this like a psychic projection type deal? I don't know. It's not really given time to explain if this is a future version of Earth, of like Earthlings, or even Earth spiders. But it is enough to make me question, like, is that what it is? Or are we just doing a pretty normal story? No, it's well questioned. You have a lot of this episode. It's just taking place on Metebelis 3. We're off of Earth right now, which is good. We get an alien adventure, with some fun. But here's a complaint. Not a lot happens. Um, I just finished watching it, and I'm struggling to remember everything that happened. You have the plot with the eight legs, who they want to conquer the universe because, well, they're Doctor Who villains. It's not some big. Yes, you see, we have amazingly well thought out motivations. We are just no, we're just villains. We're villainous evil spiders. Um, and Sarah Jane tries to save the Doctor. She gets herself captured. The Doctor gets himself captured, rescuing her. So basically, by the end of this, everyone's captured. This is the let's just move pieces into place so we can have our story, and not like we're doing a deep thing. It's just it's a quick story, and yeah, it's a good story. I enjoy the plot of the episode. Um, even if it does have the problems with being a little too slow in places and not quite knowing what it wants to be and having those issues. Lupton is getting embroiled in the plan, and he and his spider, they seem to also have their own little plots, but it's very much like everyone's plotting. All the spiders are plotting, all the humans are plotting, Lupton's plotting. The humans want to save themselves, but they can't, so the Doctor is here to inspire a revolution. A very standard Doctor Who trope. It's not the story's not doing anything amazingly out of the norm here. It's not gonna be like, oh, I can't believe they pulled this this whole this whole plot thread. No, it's a fairly standard Who episode. And sometimes that's all you really need to keep a story going, is just some standard Who fun. So I'm going to give Planet of the Spiders Part 4 a 7 out of 10. Alright, it is the 20th of July, 2018, and I just finished watching Part 5 of Planet of the Spiders. And Part 5 of Planet of the Spiders is notable for actually returning us to form after Part 4 was a little bit of a dip in quality. This one actually has a lot of stuff happening. The first big thing is, well, let's be honest, the cliffhanger for Part 4 was probably what didn't help it. So, the cliffhanger for the resolution for Part 5, we pretty much just have the Doctor essentially captured. And this is something where I think I need to highlight Sarah Jane and the Doctor's banter. I haven't really discussed it much, but as characters, it's a much different dynamic than Jo Grant or Liz Shaw. It's closer to Liz Shaw than to Jo, but it's not that same type of banter, because the third Doctor's had companions who are from three very, very different actresses. And his banter with Sarah Jane it's not quite on an equal level, but it's on a good friends level. The Doctor and Jo were more of a student and a teacher. The Doctor and Liz were more equals as scientists. But the Doctor and Sarah Jane have just these little quips at each other, and that's something that really helps a lot of their dynamics. It's a matter of the entire being of the story left through Benny as a character. Why did I say Benny? Sarah Jane as a character. She's spunky. And what's interesting is that this is the episode where Sarah Jane, and this is the only time that it's really happened, she gets possessed by a spider here. Through chicory, she lets her guard down a little bit. Because, well, the spider says, like, yes, no, I want to help you. I want to help humanity. I don't want to be evil. So you have that, and the audience already knows, no, that's not a smart thing to do. The spiders are evil. They're not here to help everybody. It's going to end poorly. And of course it does. It ends pretty poorly. Sarah Jane, ends up being under the spider and tries to steal the crystal from the Doctor near the end of the episode. When we get back to Earth, because this is really the final episode on Metebelis 3. Like, it doesn't... We're back on Earth after this, where the crystal is. We also have Tommy really brought into the fray as he's become intelligent. He's been working with Choji, who was sort of the leader of the monastery. Turns out Choji's... the big abbot that Campo is actually an old friend of the Doctor's from Gallifrey. He's the hermit from The Speech and the Time Monster. Yeah, this is an episode where we really get quite a bit of, oddly enough, Gallifreyan lore, much like we did in the War Games. Something that I think the episode helps the episode just go to a really high status. Doesn't do everything too well. You can tell it is a little padded, and the cliffhanger just sort of is dragged on. It should have been cut much earlier. It feels like it was underrunning a bit, so they had to just stall for time, and we're like, right, we need to add some stuff, add a little plot with some of the Buddhists getting spiders on their back. But also, we have Jon Pertwee getting afraid as the Doctor. This episode hasn't really, the story itself so far hasn't really done too much with the idea that the Doctor is going to be regenerating at the end. But here the Great One seems to have a hold over him, over the Third Doctor, and it's this hold of, I sort of know that you're going to die, and I know I'm going to kill you, because you are less powerful than me. And it's a very sort of a nuanced portrayal, but it's also a very creepy portrayal. It sort of gets under your skin, the fact that the Doctor is probably not going to make it out of this alive. The Great One also is just a giant spider. Realized pretty decently on a 75 budget, despite quite a bit of fringing in this episode with all the CSO, especially when the spiders show up near the climax of the episode. But it leads us into a conclusion. It's giving us those hints so we can let the end of the story wash over us and give Jon Pertwee his big exit. Because he's about to say goodbye. And saying goodbye is always difficult for a Doctor. And, it'll be fun to see the next Doctor, of course. There's no doubt about that. But just letting the Doctor end his life. And that's really where this is the first episode to really give us that feeling that it's coming to a close. We're about to move on to something new. And that's great. I love the feeling. So, that being said, with all of, just the amazing stuff with the episode, I'm going to give Planet of the Spiders Part 5 a 9 out of 10. Alright, it is the 21st of July 2018, and I just finished watching Part 6 of Planet of the Spiders, the final episode of the Jon Pertwee era of Doctor Who, basically being the Third Doctor's swan song, where, well, we start off with a very lengthy cliffhanger reprise, and what I mean by that is that, it goes on for too long. It's really something that probably should have been, cut down a little bit in length, and it's not very well done. It's very much it's very much the, hey, this is at the end, and we are doing a story where, we are trying to end it here, but we've generally got the problem of hey, we are padding. But this is very much an episode that sets up sort of the lore of regeneration. This is the first time we actually hear what regeneration is. We find out that Shoji and Kanpo are both the Time Lords, and they're actually the same Time Lord. Kanpo's sort of this Shoji is this projection of Kanpo's future self, and also we get the connection to the Doctor. Shoji is actually, Kanpo's actually the hermit from the Time Monster speech, and that is something that you get that big reveal, and it's amazingly well done. It's a lot of fun, just generally as a story, but also it gives us gives the Doctor some interesting character traits. He has one of those he's one of those interesting people, because he he creates the story. He creates like the beginning. Basically, we have this story. You have sort of a moral. You have the Doctor having to essentially has to be the one who he has to be the one to figure out, he has to face his issues, which were, the sort of the idea is that the greed for knowledge of the Time Lord, of the Doctor. So he goes back to Matabelis 3 and gives back the crystal, which, oddly enough, it causes the Great One to die, which is a bit of a cop-out ending, if you ask me, like, really? But it's too late, the radiation is already taking its toll, and the Doctor dies and regenerates. And that's about it. It's not a very, very, robust ending, but it is an ending. And it ends, with enough, interest that you ask, okay, where are we going from here? We have our new Doctor. He doesn't even get a few words in, but the final scene with Jon Pertwee is really what really elevates this episode to greatness, as well as just generally having a good, nice, moral type thing. It's like, you have the entire idea being that, the Doctor gets what he deserves in the end, and he has to move on. And it's very sad. You have Sarah Jane crying, essentially, at the death of her friend, and the Brigadier being ready is like, well, here we go again. And it's really well played. It makes you feel bad for the Third Doctor as he dies. It's not too overly playing with your emotions, but it is giving you that emotion that that this has been going bad. So I'm going to give Planet of the Spiders Part 6 a 9 out of 10. And we add up all the scores to give Planet of the Spiders a final score of 8 out of 10. Thank everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon, the final Jon Pertwee installment. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll be back next time when we start the Tom Baker era of Doctor Who with Robot.